Hey everyone, welcome back to my channel. I'm back with another collection of stories that will make you question everything you thought you knew about relationships. Today, we're diving deep into some of the most jaw-dropping cheating stories from Reddit. And trust me when I say these are wild. Sit back, relax, and let me take you through some tales that prove reality is stranger than fiction. Our first story comes from someone who thought they had the perfect relationship until one phone call changed everything. I never thought I'd be writing this, but here I am at 3 in the morning, unable to sleep after what happened today. My girlfriend Sarah and I have been together for 2 years. Living together for the past 6 months, everything seemed perfect. We had our routines, our inside jokes, our plans for the future. I was even looking at engagement rings last month. Sarah works as a marketing coordinator at a tech startup downtown, and I'm a software developer working remotely. Most days she usually gets home around 6:30, and we cook dinner together, watch Netflix, the usual couple stuff, but over the past month she started working late, more often staying until 8 or 9, sometimes not getting home until after 10. When I'd ask about it, she'd just say they had a big project coming up, and her boss was being demanding about deadlines. I didn't think much of it at first. Work gets crazy sometimes, right? But then I started noticing other changes. She was more protective of her phone, always taking it to the bathroom with her, or keeping it face down during dinner. When it used to just sit there between us, she also started showering as soon as she got home from work, every single night, which was new, because she used to shower in the mornings last Tuesday. I was working from home when I realised I'd left my laptop charger at the office. I called Sarah to see if she could grab it on her way home. Since her office is in the same building, she said, sure, no problem, and that she'd bring it home with her. That evening around 7, I got a call from an unknown number. Usually I don't answer those, but something made me pick up. The voice on the other end was a woman I didn't recognise. She sounded nervous, hesitant, like she was having second thoughts about making the call. She asked if I was dating Sarah Martinez, and when I said yes, she went quiet for a long moment. Then she said, I think you should know that your girlfriend has been sleeping with my husband. My stomach dropped. I asked her what she meant, and she explained that her husband Mark works at the same company as Sarah. They've been having an affair for the past 6 weeks. She found out yesterday when she discovered text messages on his phone. Explicit photos, meeting times, hotel reservations. The work, she said. They've been meeting at the Marriott downtown every Tuesday and Thursday during their so-called late work nights. I couldn't speak. I just stood there in my kitchen holding the phone, while this stranger told me how she'd hired a private investigator to confirm her suspicions, how she had photos of them entering and leaving the hotel together, how they'd been stupid enough to use the company credit card for some of their expenses. She said she was calling me because she thought I deserved to know, just like she wished someone had told her sooner. After I hung up, I just sat on my couch staring at the wall, trying to process what I'd just heard. Part of me wanted to believe it was some kind of mistake or cruel prank, but deep down, I knew it explained everything. The late nights, the sudden need for privacy, the immediate showers when she got home, the way she'd been distant and distracted lately. Around 8:15, Sarah walked through the door with my laptop charger in hand, acting completely normal, asking about my day, suggesting we order Thai food for dinner. I watched her, and all I could think about was how good she was at lying, how easily the deception rolled off her tongue. I didn't say anything that night. I needed time to figure out what to do next. The next morning, after Sarah left for work, I did something I never thought I'd do. I drove to the Marriott downtown and asked to speak with the front desk manager. I explained that I suspected my girlfriend was having an affair and wondered if they could confirm whether someone matching her description had been coming in regularly. I showed them a photo on my phone. The manager was sympathetic, but said they couldn't give out guest information for privacy reasons. But then one of the desk clerks who'd been listening quietly spoke up. She said she remembered seeing a couple matching the description I'd given. They'd been coming in every Tuesday and Thursday afternoon, around 2 o'clock for the past month or so. Always paid cash, always left separately, about an hour apart. That was all the confirmation I needed. I thanked them and drove home to pack Sarah's belongings. I wasn't angry yet, just numb, like I was moving through water. Everything felt surreal and disconnected. I folded her clothes, put her toiletries in boxes, gathered all her books and personal items. I wanted her gone before the reality of what she'd done really hit me. When Sarah came home that evening, she found her stuff neatly packed by the front door, and me sitting at the kitchen table with printouts of hotel receipts that Mark's wife had emailed me, along with several photos of Sarah and Mark entering the hotel together. The look on her face when she saw everything laid out, there was a mixture of shock, panic, and something that might have been relief. She didn't even try to deny it. She just started crying, saying she was sorry that it wasn't supposed to happen this way, that she never meant for me to find out like this. She said she'd been planning to end things with Mark and figure out how to tell me, but that she'd gotten in too deep and didn't know how to get out. I asked her how long she'd been lying to my face, and she said every day for 6 weeks. The worst part wasn't even the cheating. It was how easily she'd looked me in the eye every morning and evening and acted like nothing was wrong. How she'd made plans with me for the weekend while texting another man about their next hotel meetup. How she'd said she loved me while carrying on a full relationship with someone else. I told her I wanted her out. That night, she begged for a chance to explain, to work things out, but I was done listening. She packed a suitcase with essentials and said she'd come back for the rest later. I changed the locks the next day. I haven't spoken to her since except through text to coordinate her picking up the remaining items. That was 5 days ago, and I'm still processing everything. Friends keep asking if I'm okay, and honestly, I don't know. I feel betrayed, obviously, but also stupid for not seeing the signs sooner, and weirdly grateful to Mark's wife for having the courage to call me. I can't imagine how long this might have gone on if she hadn't. The hardest part is that I really thought Sarah was the one. I'd started imagining our whole future together, and now I have to rebuild everything from scratch. I keep wondering if any of it was real or if she was just going through the motions while her heart was somewhere else. So that's my story. I guess I'm posting this because I need to get it out somewhere and maybe warn others to trust their instincts. If something feels off in your relationship, it probably is. And if someone calls you with information about your partner's infidelity, as much as it hurts, they're doing you a favour. That's the end of that story. And wow, just wow, the fact that Mark's wife had the decency to call him while his own girlfriend was living a double life right under his nose for 6 weeks. That takes guts and, honestly, probably saved him from wasting even more time on someone who clearly didn't respect him enough. To be honest, the way she had everything, so calculated, the hotel meetings, the company credit card, the immediate showers, it's like she was running a whole operation. Moving on to our next story, this one comes from someone who discovered their partner's betrayal in the most unexpected way during what should have been a celebration. I'm still shaking as I write this, and I don't even know where to begin. My husband David and I have been married for 8 years, together for 12. We have 2 kids, Emma who's 6 and Jake who's 4. David works in finance and travels for work about once a month, usually just overnight trips to meet with clients in nearby cities. Last weekend was our 8th wedding anniversary, and David had planned this elaborate surprise weekend getaway to a bed and breakfast about 2 hours north of where we live. He'd arranged for his mother to watch the kids and had been talking about it for weeks, saying he wanted to do something special to reconnect and celebrate how far we'd come. As a couple, we arrived at the bed and breakfast Friday evening, and it was absolutely beautiful. This old Victorian house with gardens and a view of the mountains. The owners were this sweet elderly couple who'd been running the place for 30 years. They showed us to our room, which had a fireplace and a clawfoot tub, and David seemed so proud of himself for finding such a perfect spot. Saturday morning we had breakfast on the porch and then decided to drive into the nearby town to walk around and do some shopping. David was being extra attentive, holding my hand, taking photos of us together, buying me little gifts from the local shops. I remember thinking how lucky I was to have a husband who still made such an effort. After all these years, that afternoon we went back to our room to rest before dinner. David said he was going to take a shower and suggested I relax with a book on the porch swing, I was sitting outside reading when I heard his phone buzzing repeatedly on the dresser inside. He'd left it there while he showered, and normally I would never look at someone else's phone, but it kept buzzing and buzzing. I went inside thinking maybe it was his mother calling about the kids or some work emergency that couldn't wait. The phone was face up on the dresser, and I could see multiple text notifications from someone named Ashley. I didn't recognize the name, but the preview of the latest message made my blood run cold. It said, "Missing you so much, baby, can't wait until you get back from your boring anniversary trip." I stood there staring at the phone screen, feeling like the ground had disappeared beneath my feet. I could hear David singing in the shower, completely oblivious while my entire world was falling apart. I picked up his phone and saw that it wasn't locked. He must have forgotten to set the security back up after updating it. I opened the message thread with Ashley, and what I found destroyed me. There were hundreds of messages going back months, intimate photos, declarations of love, detailed descriptions of their sexual encounters, and plans for future meetings. I scrolled back to the beginning and realised this had been going on for almost a year. Ashley worked at one of the companies David visited regularly. For work, they'd met during a business dinner and started texting. That same night, the messages showed how their relationship had progressed from friendly work chat to flirting to full-blown emotional and physical affair. She knew everything about our marriage, our kids, our problems. David had told her things he'd never even discussed with me. The worst messages were the ones where David complained about me, to her calling me boring and saying our marriage felt like a business arrangement. He told her he was only staying because of the kids, and that being with her made him feel alive again. For the first time in years, there were messages from just 2 days ago where he told her about planning this anniversary weekend, and how he wished he could be taking her instead. I felt sick reading through months of betrayal, but I couldn't stop scrolling. There were photos of them together, at restaurants, hotels, even in what looked like her apartment. David looked happier in those photos than I'd seen him look with me in years. The messages showed they'd said they loved each other. They'd talked about David leaving me once the kids were older. They'd planned a whole future together. I heard the shower turn off and quickly put the phone back where I'd found it, then went back outside, to the porch swing. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely hold my book. David came out a few minutes later, in fresh clothes, asking if I was ready for dinner. I looked at him and wondered how he could act so normal when he'd been living this massive lie. We went to dinner at a little Italian place in town, and David kept talking about how nice it was to have time just the two of us, how we should do weekend trips more often, how much he loved me and appreciated everything I did for our family. I sat there nodding and smiling, while inside I was screaming every word he said. Felt like another knife twisting in my chest. That night back at the bed and breakfast. David wanted to be intimate, and I couldn't. I made an excuse about being tired, and he seemed disappointed but didn't push it. I lay awake all night next to him, wondering how long this had been going on, wondering if our entire recent history was a lie, wondering how many business trips had really been opportunities to see her. Sunday morning, I woke up before David and checked his phone again. There were new messages from Ashley asking how the weekend was going and saying she couldn't wait to see him Tuesday, when he got back from his next scheduled business trip. I realised that trip, which he'd told me was to meet with a new client, was actually planned time with her. I spent the drive home in silence, while David chatted about what a perfect weekend it had been, and how we should make anniversary trips, an annual tradition. I kept thinking about how he'd planned this elaborate, romantic gesture for me, while simultaneously carrying on an affair with someone else. How he could look me in the eye and tell me he loved me while texting another woman that he wanted to leave me. When we got home and picked up the kids, I went through the motions of normal family life, helping with homework, making dinner, giving baths, but inside I was completely numb. I kept looking at David playing with our children and wondering how he could compartmentalize his life so completely, how he could be such a devoted father while being such a terrible husband. That night after the kids were asleep, I confronted him. I showed him that I had seen the messages with Ashley and asked him to explain. David went completely white, then tried to minimize it, saying it was just harmless flirting that had gotten out of hand, that it didn't mean anything, that he would end it immediately. I told him I'd read months of messages and seen the photos, that I knew this wasn't harmless flirting, but a full relationship he'd been hiding from me for almost a year. He broke down crying, saying he was sorry that he'd made a mistake, that he loved our family and didn't want to lose us, he said. Being with Ashley made him feel young and exciting again, but that he realised now it was just a fantasy. I asked him how many business trips had really been to see her, and he admitted that most of them over the past 6 months had involved spending time with her. Even when he had legitimate work meetings, he would extend his stays to be with her. I asked if he'd slept with her in our bed, and he said no. But I'm not sure I believe him about anything anymore. The thing that hurts most isn't even the physical betrayal, it's the emotional intimacy he shared with her. The way he talked to her about our problems and his feelings. The way he planned a future with her while going through the motions of our marriage. The way he could compartmentalize his life so completely that he genuinely seemed to enjoy our anniversary weekend while texting her about missing her. I told David I needed time to think and that he should stay at his brother's house for a while. He's been calling and texting constantly, saying he wants to work on our marriage, that he'll do anything to fix this, but I don't know if I can ever trust him again. How do you rebuild a relationship when the foundation has been completely destroyed? I keep thinking about our anniversary weekend and how proud he seemed of himself for planning something so thoughtful, while he was actively betraying me with someone else. How he could hold my hand and tell me he loved me while counting down the hours until he could see her again. So here I am, a week later, still trying to process everything. Still wondering if our entire marriage has been a lie. Still trying to figure out what to tell our children. If we don't work this out, I never imagined I'd be in this situation, and I have no idea what comes next. That story just hits different, doesn't it? The calculated nature of planning a romantic anniversary weekend while actively texting your affair partner about missing them. That level of compartmentalization is genuinely disturbing, and the fact that he was complaining about his wife to his mistress while playing the devoted husband role shows just how deep the deception went. Reading those messages must have felt like discovering your entire reality was fiction. Our final story for today comes from someone whose discovery method was so unexpected it almost sounds like something out of a movie. I'm 26 and I've been with my boyfriend Marcus for 3 years. We moved in together last year and everything seemed normal until I started getting these weird packages delivered to our apartment. Packages I definitely didn't order. It started about 2 months ago when I came home from work to find a small box addressed to me, sitting by our front door. Inside was a pair of earrings. Expensive looking ones that I'd never seen before. When I asked Marcus about it, he seemed just as confused as I was. We figured maybe someone had the wrong address or it was some kind of marketing sample. Then it happened again, a week later. This time it was a silk scarf, beautiful, but not my style at all. Marcus suggested maybe I had a secret admirer, which we laughed about, but I was starting to feel uneasy about receiving gifts from someone I couldn't identify over the next few weeks. More packages arrived, a bottle of perfume, a designer wallet, a set of fancy candles. Each one was something I would never buy for myself, but clearly expensive. I tried to track down where they were coming from, but there was never a return address, just my name and our apartment number. I even called a few of the companies whose products I'd received, but they said the orders were placed online with a credit card, and they couldn't give me any more information. Due to privacy policies, Marcus seemed as puzzled as I was, and even started joking that maybe I should enjoy having a mysterious benefactor, but something about the whole situation felt wrong, especially when I realised that all the gifts were things that would appeal to someone who knew my tastes really well. The earrings were exactly the style I usually wore, The perfume was a scent I'd mentioned liking once the wallet was the perfect size for my purse. Last Thursday I was working from home when I heard our apartment door open. I called out thinking it was Marcus coming back from lunch but got no response. I walked to the living room and found another package on the coffee table, still warm from being outside, but no sign of who had delivered it. This time I was genuinely frightened because it meant someone had a key to our apartment. I immediately called Marcus at work and told him what happened. He seemed shocked and said he'd come home right away to check the locks and see if anything was missing. When he got home about 20 minutes later, he examined the package with me. Inside was a piece of jewellery, a necklace that was absolutely gorgeous and probably worth more than I make in a month. That's when Marcus got quiet. Really quiet. He picked up the necklace and just stared at it for a long time. I asked him what was wrong, and he said the necklace looked familiar, that he thought he might have seen it before somewhere. I pressed him on where, and he kept saying he couldn't remember, but something about his whole demeanour had changed that evening. I couldn't let it go. I kept asking Marcus where he thought he'd seen the necklace, and he kept giving vague answers. Finally, around 10 o'clock, he broke down and confessed everything. The packages weren't from a secret admirer. They were from him. He'd been ordering gifts and having them delivered to make it seem like they were from someone else. I was completely floored. I asked him why he would do something so elaborate and weird instead of just giving me gifts. Normally, he said he'd been feeling guilty about something and thought if I believed someone else was interested in me, I might appreciate him more. He said he wanted to create some mystery and excitement in our relationship, but that wasn't the whole truth. After I kept pushing for a real explanation, he finally admitted that he'd been cheating on me for the past 4 months with a co-worker named Jessica. He said the guilt was eating him alive, and he thought if he showered me with anonymous gifts, it would somehow balance out what he was doing behind my back. He said he'd been planning to break up with Jessica and never tell me about the affair, but seeing how happy the mystery gifts made me feel made his guilt even worse. So he decided to confess to the gift scheme, hoping it would lead to a conversation about our relationship, where he could come clean about everything. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. He'd been having an affair, and his solution was to gaslight me into thinking I had a secret admirer while using expensive gifts to assuage his own guilt. It was like he'd created this elaborate psychological manipulation to deal with his own conscience, rather than just being honest with me. I asked him how he could watch me open each package and act confused and concerned when he knew exactly where they were coming from. He said, it started as a way to test whether I would tell him about receiving gifts from another man. And when I did tell him about every single package, he realised I wasn't hiding anything from him, which made his own deception feel even worse. The worst part was learning that he'd been using our joint credit card to pay for all the gifts. So I'd technically been paying for half of this weird guilt-driven charade he'd been putting me through. For 2 months, he'd spent over $800 of our money on this elaborate scheme to make himself feel better about cheating. When I asked about Jessica, he said they met at a work conference and started texting, then meeting for drinks after work, then eventually sleeping together at her apartment. He said it wasn't serious and that he'd always planned to end it, but kept putting it off because he didn't want to hurt her feelings. Meanwhile, he was fine with lying to my face every single day. I told him I needed him to leave immediately and that I'd pack his things and leave them outside our door the next day. He begged me to let him explain more to give him a chance to make it right, but I was done listening. He'd had months to be honest with me, and instead chose to create this bizarre alternate reality where I thought I had a mysterious admirer. The next morning, I found out that he'd given Jessica a key to our apartment. That's how the packages were being delivered when I wasn't home. She'd been coming into our shared space to drop off gifts that he'd bought to make himself feel better about sleeping with her. The violation of having this other woman in my home without my knowledge was almost worse than the cheating itself. I changed the locks that afternoon and blocked Marcus on everything he tried to contact me through mutual friends, but I told them I didn't want to hear from him again. I kept all the gifts he'd given me, not because I wanted them, but because I'd paid for half of them, and figured I might as well get something out of this nightmare. It's been 3 weeks now, and I'm still processing the psychological manipulation of it all. He didn't just cheat, he created this elaborate fiction that made me question my own reality while using my own money to fund his guilt management strategy. I keep thinking about how excited I was to receive each package, and how he watched me open them knowing the whole time that it was all a lie. The hardest part is that some small part of me had started to believe that maybe I was special enough for someone to send me anonymous gifts, that maybe I had some kind of magnetic appeal that attracted secret admirers. Finding out it was all manufactured by my cheating boyfriend to deal with his own guilt has left me questioning everything about my self-worth and judgment. I still have no idea how long the affair with Jessica would have continued if I hadn't pushed him about the necklace. He might have kept up this gift-giving charade indefinitely, while continuing to sleep with her and lie to both of us. I feel like I was living in some kind of psychological experiment designed by someone who claimed to love me. So that's my story about discovering my boyfriend's affair through fake anonymous gifts that I was unknowingly paying for. It's been a learning experience about how far people will go to avoid taking responsibility for their actions, and how creativity and manipulation often go hand in hand when someone's trying to manage their own guilt. That story is absolutely wild. The mental gymnastics required to think that buying your girlfriend expensive gifts with her own money while cheating on her is somehow going to make the situation better is just mind-boggling, and having the affair partner deliver the gifts using a key to their shared apartment adds this whole extra layer of violation that's genuinely disturbing. Well, that wraps up today's collection of cheating stories from the depths of Reddit. These tales really show how creative people can get when they're living double lives, and how the truth has a way of surfacing in the most unexpected ways. If you made it this far into the video, you're clearly as fascinated by these relationship disasters as I am, so consider subscribing for more stories that'll make you grateful for boring, honest relationships. Until next time, stay curious and stay faithful. The psychological manipulation in that last story is just staggering. Using someone's own money to fund elaborate guilt management while having your affair partner deliver the gifts to your shared home. That's not just cheating, that's a whole psychological operation. The level of planning and deception required to pull that off for months shows a truly disturbing mindset. Let's move on to our next story, and this one involves a discovery that happened during what was supposed to be the happiest day of someone's life. I'm writing this from my hotel room still in my wedding dress because I honestly don't know what else to do with myself right now. Today was supposed to be my wedding day, and in many ways it was, but not how I ever imagined it would end. My fiancé Jake and I have been together for 4 years, engaged for the last 18 months. We met through mutual friends at a barbecue and hit it off immediately. Jake is charming, funny, and has this way of making everyone around him feel special. He works in sales, which suits his personality perfectly, and I'm a nurse at the local children's hospital. Planning our wedding has been mostly smooth sailing. Jake was surprisingly involved, for a guy helping me pick out flowers, tasting cakes, and even having opinions about centerpieces. His only weird quirk was that he was very particular about the seating arrangements, especially wanting to control who sat at which tables. He kept saying he wanted to make sure everyone had a good time and didn't want any drama from mixing the wrong people. The wedding was at a beautiful venue about an hour outside the city. We'd rented it for the entire weekend, so our out-of-town guests could stay on the property. The ceremony went perfectly. Jake looked handsome in his tux. I felt beautiful in my dress. And when we said our vows, there wasn't a dry eye in the house. Everything felt magical and right. After the ceremony, during cocktail hour, I was making my rounds talking to guests when my college roommate Sarah pulled me aside. She had this weird expression on her face, like she wanted to tell me something, but wasn't sure if she should. She kept looking over at Jake, who was across the room talking to his groomsmen. Sarah asked if we could talk privately, so we went into one of the bridal suite rooms. She sat me down and said she needed to tell me something that she'd been debating about for weeks. She said about a month ago she'd been at a restaurant downtown with some friends when she saw Jake having dinner with a woman she didn't recognize. At first she thought maybe it was work-related, or maybe one of his cousins visiting from out of town. But then she saw them holding hands across the table and kissing. She said she sat there for 20 minutes, watching them, and there was no doubt it was romantic. She took some photos on her phone because she couldn't believe what she was seeing. I felt like someone had punched me in the stomach. Sarah showed me the photos on her phone, and there was Jake, clear as day, holding hands with a brunette woman I'd never seen before. The timestamp showed it was taken 3 weeks ago. I asked Sarah why she hadn't told me sooner, and she said she'd been agonising over it, that she didn't want to ruin my wedding, but also couldn't let me marry him without knowing. I stared at those photos, trying to make sense of what I was seeing. The woman looked familiar, but I couldn't place where I might have seen her before. She was pretty, probably in her early 30s, with long dark hair. In one photo, Jake was leaning across the table to kiss her, and they both looked completely comfortable, like this wasn't their first time together. I asked Sarah if she was absolutely sure it was Jake, and she said there was no doubt. She'd even followed them outside after dinner and watched them get into the same car together. She said she'd been hoping maybe there was some innocent explanation, but seeing how intimate they were, she knew there wasn't. I sat there in my wedding dress, feeling like my whole world was falling apart. All I could think about was how Jake had looked me in the eye that morning and told me how excited he was to marry me, how he couldn't wait to start our life together. Meanwhile, he'd been seeing someone else just weeks before our wedding. Sarah hugged me while I cried and asked what I wanted to do. I said I needed to confront Jake immediately, that I couldn't go through with the reception, knowing what I knew. She offered to come with me for support, but I said I needed to handle it myself. I fixed my makeup and went back out to find my new husband. Jake was at the bar getting drinks for his groomsmen when I approached him. I asked if we could talk alone, and he said sure, but seemed confused by my serious tone. We went back to the bridal suite, and I closed the door behind us. I pulled out Sarah's phone and showed him the photos without saying a word. The colour drained from Jake's face immediately. He started stammering, saying it wasn't what it looked like, that he could explain everything. I asked him who the woman was, and he went quiet for a long time. Finally, he admitted that her name was Monica, and that they'd been seeing each other on and off for about 6 months. I asked him what on and off meant, and he said they'd met at a work conference and started texting. It turned into meeting for drinks, then dinner, then more. He said he'd tried to break it off multiple times because he knew it was wrong, but he kept going back to her. He said the last time he'd seen her was 2 weeks ago, when he'd supposedly gone to visit his college buddy in Denver. I asked him if he'd been planning to continue seeing her after we got married, and he said no, that he'd been planning to end things for good after the honeymoon. He said marrying me made him realise that Monica was just a distraction, and that I was the one he really wanted to be with. He begged me to forgive him, and said it was just cold feet that made him act out. I looked at this man I'd just married, and felt like I was seeing a stranger. How could he look me in the eye every day for months, while carrying on with someone else? How could he plan our wedding invite, all our friends and family, and make vows to me while actively betraying me? How could he think that continuing an affair right up until our wedding day was just cold feet? I told Jake that I wanted him to leave immediately, that I needed time to think about what this meant for our marriage. He started crying, saying he was sorry that he loved me and didn't want to lose me. He said Monica meant nothing to him and that he'd been stupid and selfish. He begged me not to throw away our relationship over his mistake, but I couldn't get past the timeline. This wasn't some drunken one-night stand months ago that he'd confessed to and worked to make right. This was an ongoing relationship that had continued right up until our wedding day. He'd been with her 2 weeks ago while I was finalising details with our florist and caterer. He'd probably been texting her while we were having our rehearsal dinner. I told Jake he had 30 minutes to tell his family what had happened and leave the venue before I made an announcement to all our guests. He panicked and asked me not to humiliate him in front of everyone. I told him he should have thought about that before he decided to have an affair weeks before our wedding. He begged for more time to figure out how to handle the situation, but I was done negotiating. Jake left the bridal suite, and I could hear him talking frantically to his best man in the hallway. About 20 minutes later, his parents came to talk to me. His mother was crying and asking me to reconsider that Jake had made a mistake, but that he loved me and wanted to work things out. His father was more subdued but said they hoped I'd give Jake a chance to make things right. I told them I appreciated their concern, but that this wasn't something that could be fixed with apologies. Jake had made a choice to betray me repeatedly, right up until our wedding day, and I couldn't pretend that was okay just because we'd already paid for a reception. They said they understood and that they were sorry for what Jake had done. After Jake's family left, I called my parents and my sister into the room and told them what had happened. My mother immediately started crying and hugging me. My father looked like he wanted to find Jake and punch him. My sister asked if I wanted her to make an announcement to the guests or if I wanted to do it myself. I decided I needed to address everyone personally. We went out to the reception area where about 80 of our closest friends and family were waiting for dinner to be served. I asked the DJ to cut the music and give me the microphone. Everyone looked excited, thinking I was about to make some sweet, newlywed speech. Instead, I told them that Jake had been having an affair and that he would not be attending the reception. I said I was sorry for the awkward situation, but that I'd wanted everyone to hear it from me directly. I thanked them for being there to support us and said that while the marriage was over, before it really began, I hoped they would stay and celebrate with me anyway, because I needed my people around me. The room was dead silent for about 10 seconds, then people started getting up and coming over to hug me. Several of Jake's friends and family members left immediately, looking embarrassed and upset, but most of my friends and family stayed, and we ended up having what my sister later called the best divorce party she'd ever been to. My aunt, who'd flown in from Seattle, said she was proud of me for not pretending everything was fine, just to avoid an awkward conversation. My college friends rallied around me, and we ended up dancing until midnight. Even some of Jake's relatives stayed and apologized for his behavior, saying they'd had no idea what was going on. The strangest part was that I felt relieved. Yes, I was heartbroken and humiliated, but I also felt like I dodged a bullet. If Jake could carry on an affair right up until our wedding day, what would stop him from doing it again during our marriage? At least I found out who he really was before we bought a house together or had children. I'm filing for annulment on Monday, since we were technically only married for about 4 hours. Jake has been calling and texting non-stop, but I've blocked him on everything. His mother called earlier, asking if we could all sit down and talk, but I told her there's nothing left to discuss. Some betrayals are just too big to come back from, so here I am in my hotel room, still processing everything. Tomorrow I'll start the process of returning wedding gifts and cancelling our honeymoon. It's not how I imagined my wedding night would go, but at least I know the truth now. Better to find out today than 5 years from now, with kids and a mortgage tying us together. The fact that Sarah agonized for weeks about whether to tell her speaks volumes about what a difficult position that puts someone in. But imagine if she hadn't said anything, and this woman had gone on her honeymoon, not knowing her new husband had been actively cheating weeks before their wedding. The courage it took to make that announcement to 80 guests and then turn it into a celebration of her own strength is honestly inspiring. Some people really do show their true character in crisis moments. Our next story comes from someone who discovered their partner's infidelity through the most mundane daily routine you could imagine. I work as a veterinary assistant at a small animal clinic, and my boyfriend Ryan works construction, so we have pretty different schedules. I usually get home around 6:30, and he's typically home by 5 unless he's working overtime. We've been living together for about a year and have fallen into these comfortable domestic routines that I actually really love. One of our little traditions is that I always make us both coffee in the morning using our fancy espresso machine that Ryan saved up to buy last Christmas. He usually drinks his black, and I add cream and sugar to mine. It's become this sweet ritual where we sit together for 10 minutes before we both head off to work, even when we're running late. About 6 weeks ago, I started noticing that our coffee supplies were running low much faster than usual. We'd go through a bag of beans in like 4 days instead of the usual week and a half. I mentioned it to Ryan, and he said, Maybe the portions were off, or perhaps the beans weren't as dense as our regular brand. It seemed like a reasonable explanation, so I didn't think much more about it. But then I started paying closer attention to our morning routine. Ryan would make his coffee and drink it while we talked, but then he'd often make a second cup right before I left for work. When I asked about it, he said he'd been extra tired lately and needed the caffeine boost. Again, it seemed normal enough, especially since construction is physically demanding work. Last month I had to leave work early because one of our patients bit me and I needed to get a tetanus shot at urgent care. I got home around 2 in the afternoon, expecting to have the house to myself for a few hours. Ryan's truck wasn't in the driveway, so I figured he was still at the job site like usual. But when I walked into our kitchen, I noticed 2 coffee cups in the sink. 2 cups with lipstick marks. I don't wear lipstick to work because I'm constantly washing my hands and wearing masks, so it smudges off immediately. The lipstick was a bright red shade that I don't even own. I stood there staring at those cups, feeling confused and suspicious. I checked our coffee supply and realised we'd gone through almost half a bag since yesterday morning. Someone had definitely been drinking coffee in our house while I was at work. I looked around the rest of the house and noticed other small things that seemed off. The couch cushions were arranged differently than how I'd left them. There was a water glass on Ryan's nightstand that hadn't been there that morning. I decided to stay home and wait for Ryan to get back to see what he'd say about the coffee cups. He came home around 5:30 like normal and seemed surprised to see me there early. I asked him about his day and he said it had been pretty standard, just working on a kitchen renovation across town. Then I asked if he'd been home during the day and he said no, he'd been at the job site since 7:30. I brought him into the kitchen and pointed to the coffee cups in the sink, asking whose lipstick was on one of them. Ryan looked genuinely confused for a moment, then said maybe it was from yesterday morning and I'd forgotten I'd worn lipstick. I told him I hadn't worn lipstick in weeks, and besides I'd washed all the dishes before leaving for work that morning. Ryan started getting defensive, saying maybe one of his co-workers had stopped by to borrow tools and had made coffee while they were here. I asked why someone would make coffee and put on lipstick to borrow tools, and he said maybe it was someone's girlfriend who'd come along. The story kept getting more elaborate and less believable. That weekend I decided to test my suspicions. I told Ryan I had to work Saturday morning, which wasn't unusual since we occasionally have weekend emergencies at the clinic. Instead of going to work, I parked my car at the grocery store down the street and walked back to our house through the back alley where I could see our driveway without being seen from the street. Around 10:30, a silver Honda Civic pulled into our driveway and a woman got out using what looked like a key to enter through our front door. She had long blonde hair and was wearing yoga pants and a crop top. I'd never seen her before in my life. She stayed inside for about 3 hours, then left the same way she'd come. I waited about 20 minutes, then went into the house. Sure enough, there were 2 coffee cups in the sink, both with lipstick marks. Our bed was unmade, even though I'd made it before leaving that morning. There was a hair tie on the bathroom counter that wasn't mine, and the shower was still damp like someone had used it recently. When Ryan got home that evening, I confronted him with everything I'd observed. At first he tried to deny it, saying I must be confused about what I'd seen. Then he tried to say the woman was his cousin, visiting from out of state, and he hadn't mentioned it because he knew I didn't like surprise visitors. Finally, when I pressed him about why his cousin would need to shower at our house, he broke down and admitted the truth. Her name is Stephanie, and she works as a receptionist at the office of the company Ryan's construction crew has been doing work for. They'd started talking during his lunch breaks, then exchanging phone numbers. She'd been coming over most afternoons when I was at work for the past 2 months. He said it started as just coffee and conversation, but had obviously progressed to more. What made it worse was learning that Ryan had given her a key to our house without telling me. She'd been letting herself in like she lived there, making coffee in my kitchen, showering in my bathroom, sleeping in my bed. He'd essentially given this other woman access to our entire shared life, while I was at work completely oblivious. I asked Ryan how he could look me in the eye every morning during our coffee ritual, knowing he'd be sharing that same intimacy with someone else in a few hours. He said he'd compartmentalized it, that his time with me felt separate from his time with her. He said he loved me and hadn't meant for things with Stephanie to go as far as they did. The betrayal felt so much deeper than just physical infidelity. He'd brought another woman into our most sacred spaces and shared our most meaningful routines with her. Every morning when we'd had coffee together, he'd known he'd be making coffee for someone else later. Every time I'd wondered about our supplies running low, he'd known exactly why, but had lied to my face about it. I told Ryan I wanted him out immediately. He begged for a chance to explain more to work things out, but I was done. The fact that he'd given her a key to our house without my knowledge crossed a line I couldn't forgive. I changed the locks that same day and told him he could collect his belongings when I wasn't home. The worst part is that our morning coffee routine had been one of my favourite parts of our relationship. It felt like this pure, intimate moment where we connected before facing our separate days. Now I realised that for 2 months, he'd been going through those motions, with me knowing he'd be recreating that same intimacy with someone else a few hours later. I still make myself coffee every morning, but it doesn't feel the same. I can't help but think about how many lies were wrapped up in those 10-minute conversations we'd have before work. How many times he'd kiss me goodbye, knowing he'd be kissing someone else in our bed that afternoon. The mundane betrayal of it all somehow feels worse than if it had been some dramatic affair. It's been 3 weeks since I kicked Ryan out, and I'm still finding little reminders of Stephanie's presence in my house. A bobby pin under the couch cushions, a different brand of shampoo in the shower that I didn't buy. It's like she was slowly moving into my life without me even knowing it was happening. I'm working with a therapist now to process the violation of having my personal space invaded so thoroughly by someone I didn't even know existed. The coffee thing really gets to me because it shows how even the most innocent daily routines can be weaponized when someone's living a double life. He turned their morning ritual into a complete lie by recreating it with his affair partner every single day. The fact that she had a key and was essentially living there part-time while the girlfriend was at work is just a whole other level of violation that goes beyond typical cheating. Let's move to our final story of the day, and this one involves a discovery that happened through something most of us do without thinking twice about it. I'm a pretty organised person by nature, and I've always been good at managing our household finances. My wife Jessica and I have been married for 6 years, and we've always kept our finances mostly separate but transparent. We each contribute to a joint account for shared expenses like rent, utilities, groceries, and we keep our individual accounts for personal spending. Every few months I like to review our credit card statements and bank records just to make sure everything looks right and we're staying on budget. It's not that I don't trust Jessica, it's just a habit I developed after my parents went through bankruptcy when I was in college due to not paying attention to their spending patterns. Last month, while going through our statements, I noticed some charges on Jessica's personal credit card that seemed unusual. There were several restaurant charges at places we'd never been to together, always for amounts that suggested 2 people dining. There were also some hotel charges in our city which struck me as odd since we live here and wouldn't need a hotel room. At first I thought maybe Jessica was treating friends to dinner more often, or perhaps staying at hotels when she had early morning meetings downtown instead of fighting traffic from our suburban house. She travels occasionally for her marketing job, so hotel charges weren't completely unusual, just the timing and location seemed strange. I decided to ask Jessica about the charges casually, without making it seem like I was monitoring her spending. Over dinner one night, I mentioned that I'd been reviewing our finances and noticed she'd been eating out more often lately. I asked if she'd found some new favourite restaurants she wanted to take me to. Jessica seemed a little flustered by the question and said she'd been grabbing lunch with co-workers more often lately due to some stressful projects at work. She said the team had been bonding over long meals to decompress from their heavy workload. It seemed plausible enough, and I didn't push the issue further. But over the next few weeks, I started paying closer attention to Jessica's schedule and behaviour. She'd been working late more often, staying until 8 or 9, when she used to be home by 6. She'd also started going into the office on some Saturdays, which was new for her. When I'd ask about her day, she'd give vague answers about meetings and deadlines without much detail. The real red flag came when I noticed charges at the same restaurant on 3 consecutive Thursday nights. The amounts were always around $80 to $90, which seemed high for a solo dinner, but perfect for 2 people sharing appetizers, entrees and drinks. The restaurant was in a part of town that Jessica had no business reason to be in, and definitely not somewhere she'd go alone. I decided to drive by the restaurant one Thursday evening around 7, when I knew there'd been another charge the week before. Sure enough, Jessica's car was in the parking lot. I sat in my car across the street, feeling sick to my stomach and trying to decide what to do. Part of me wanted to go inside and confront whatever I was about to find, but another part of me was terrified of what I'd discover. After about 20 minutes, Jessica came out of the restaurant with a man I didn't recognize. He was tall with dark hair, probably in his early 40s, and wearing a business suit. They were walking close together, talking and laughing, and when they reached their cars, he kissed her goodbye. Not a friendly peck on the cheek, but a long, passionate kiss that made it clear this wasn't a business dinner. I sat there watching my wife of 6 years kiss another man in a restaurant parking lot and felt like my entire world was collapsing. They got into separate cars and drove off in different directions, while I remained frozen in my seat trying to process what I'd just witnessed. The man she'd been kissing looked comfortable and familiar with her, like this wasn't their first time together. I drove home in a daze and pretended to be asleep when Jessica got back around 10:30. She came to bed and kissed my forehead like she always did, then went to sleep like nothing had happened. I lay awake all night staring at the ceiling, wondering how long this had been going on and what else I didn't know about my wife's secret life. The next morning I decided to do more investigating before confronting Jessica. I went back through several months of her credit card statements and found a clear pattern. Every Thursday for the past 3 months, there'd been charges at that same restaurant. There were also hotel charges twice a month, always at a boutique hotel downtown, always on Friday nights, when Jessica had told me she was staying late for inventory or client events. I also found charges at a lingerie store I'd never heard of, and several purchases at expensive clothing boutiques. Jessica had been buying things for herself that I'd never seen her wear, which suggested she was dressing up for someone other than me. The financial evidence painted a picture of a relationship that had been going on for months with someone who was clearly important enough to warrant regular expensive dinners and hotel stays. That Thursday I decided to follow Jessica again, but this time I went inside the restaurant. I asked for a table where I could see the dining room clearly and waited. Around 7:15, Jessica arrived with the same man I'd seen her with the week before. They were seated at a corner table and seemed completely absorbed in each other's company. I watched them for about an hour, and it was clear this was not a business relationship. They held hands across the table, fed each other bites of food, and gazed into each other's eyes like they were completely in love. At one point, Jessica threw her head back, laughing at something he said, and I realised I hadn't seen her that animated and joyful with me in years. When they got up to leave, I quickly paid my check and followed them outside. This time, instead of just kissing goodbye, they got into the same car together. I followed them to the boutique hotel, where Jessica had been charging stays, and watched them go inside together. I sat in the parking lot for 2 hours before Jessica came back out alone, got in her car and drove home. I confronted Jessica that night when she walked through our front door. I told her I'd seen her with another man and knew about the hotel stays and restaurant charges. I asked her to explain what was going on and give me a chance to understand the situation before I made any decisions about our marriage. Jessica broke down immediately and confessed everything. The man's name was David, and he was a client she'd been working with for about 4 months. What started as professional lunches had turned into personal dinners, then into a full emotional and physical affair. She said she'd been planning to tell me, but kept putting it off because she didn't want to hurt me and wasn't sure what she wanted to do about our marriage. She said David made her feel alive and appreciated in ways she hadn't felt in years. She said our marriage had become routine and comfortable, but lacked the passion and excitement she craved. She said she still loved me, but wasn't sure she was in love with me anymore, and that being with David had shown her what she was missing in our relationship. I asked Jessica if she wanted to work on our marriage, or if she'd rather be with David. She said she didn't know that she needed time to figure out what she wanted. I told her that wasn't good enough, that I deserved better than being someone's backup plan while she decided between me and her lover. I said if she wasn't sure she wanted to be married to me, then maybe we shouldn't be married at all. We've been separated for 2 weeks now, while Jessica stays with her sister and figures out what she wants. She says she's ended things with David and wants to try couples counselling to see if we can rebuild our relationship. But I keep thinking about how happy she looked with him at that restaurant and wondering if she'll ever look at me that way again. The financial trail made it impossible for her to deny anything. And honestly, that methodical discovery through credit card statements feels almost worse than catching someone in the act. It shows this wasn't some impulsive mistake, but a calculated ongoing relationship with its own patterns and rituals. The fact that she was essentially financing a double life with hotel stays and expensive dinners while coming home and kissing him goodnight is just devastating. When someone's that comfortable lying about their whereabouts for months, it makes you question everything you thought you knew about them. That brings us to the end of today's collection of Reddit cheating stories. These accounts really showcase how infidelity can be discovered in the most unexpected ways, from mysterious packages to coffee cup evidence to credit card statements. What strikes me most about these stories is how the discovery often reveals not just the betrayal itself, but the elaborate systems of deception people create to maintain their double lives. The anonymous gift scheme, the morning coffee ritual manipulation, the weekend anniversary charade, the financial trail of secret dinners. Each story shows a different method of compartmentalizing deceit while maintaining the facade of a loving relationship. These aren't momentary lapses in judgment, but sustained campaigns of manipulation that required constant lying and psychological gymnastics to maintain. What's perhaps most unsettling is how normal these relationships appeared on the surface before the truth came out. Wedding planning, morning routines, anniversary weekends, shared financial responsibilities, all the building blocks of committed partnerships were present while entire secret relationships flourished in parallel. It makes you wonder how many people are living these elaborate double lives right under their partners' noses. The courage it takes to confront these situations, whether it's making an announcement to wedding guests or following your partner to confirm your suspicions, speaks to the strength people can find when their reality is completely shattered. Sometimes, the most devastating discoveries lead to the most empowering moments of self-advocacy. If you've made it this far into these wild tales of relationship deception, you're clearly as fascinated by the psychology of infidelity as I am. These stories serve as both cautionary tales and reminders that trust, once broken, leaves scars that go far deeper than the act of cheating itself. Consider subscribing if you enjoyed diving into these dramatic relationship disasters with me. And I'll see you in the next video with more stories that prove reality is always stranger than fiction.